The dust-covered widow stood at the edge of the cemetery with trembling hands, twisting the golden band on her finger as she watched the undertaker lower the simple pine coffin into the hard Colorado earth. And that was when she noticed the tall cowboy watching her from beneath the shadow of a cottonwood tree. His eyes filled with something she could not quite name. Helena Morgan had never imagined herself a widow at 24 years old. The marriage had lasted only 11 months before consumption took Thomas, a shopkeeper from Denver, who had promised her a quiet life in the mountain town of Victor, Colorado. The year was 1892, and the mining town sat high in the Rocky Mountains, surrounded by peaks that touched the clouds and valleys that ran thick with pine. Thomas had come seeking better air for his weak lungs, but the altitude had only hastened his decline. Helena had nursed him through his final months, watching him fade like morning mist until there was nothing left but memory and the ring on her finger. The funeral was sparsely attended. Thomas had been too ill to make many friends, and Helena knew no one beyond the doctor who had attended him and Mrs. Fletcher, the boarding house owner who had taken pity on her. As the small gathering dispersed, Helena remained, staring at the mound of earth that now covered her husband. She felt hollow, scraped clean of feeling. The ring on her finger felt heavy, like an anchor pulling her down into depths she did not want to explore. She twisted it again, watching how the afternoon sun caught the simple gold band. It had been Thomas's mother's ring, passed down when they married in a hasty ceremony in Denver. His mother had died years before, and his father had given his blessing with obvious relief that someone would care for his sickly son. Helena had not loved Thomas when she married him. She had been practical, a young woman alone after her own parents died in a house fire, with no prospects and dwindling funds. Thomas had been kind, gentle, and desperately in need of someone. It had seemed like enough. Now she wondered what she had done with her life. Miss Morgan. The voice came from behind her, deep and careful. Helena turned to find the cowboy approaching. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a weathered face that spoke of years under the sun. His hair was dark, almost black, and his eyes were a startling blue-gray like storm clouds over the mountains. He wore dusty work clothes, practical boots, and a hat that had seen better days. He removed the hat as he drew closer, revealing that his hair was slightly long, curling at his collar. "It is Mrs. Morgan," she corrected automatically, though the title felt strange on her tongue now. "My apologies, Mrs. Morgan." His voice was respectful, but she noticed how his gaze lingered on her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "I am Adam Pierce. I worked for your husband at the mercantile during his final weeks, helping with the heavy lifting and deliveries he could no longer manage." Helena vaguely remembered Thomas mentioning someone, though she had been so consumed with nursing duties that the details of the shop's operations had escaped her attention. "I see. Thank you for coming to pay your respects." "I wanted to speak with you about the mercantile," Adam said, turning his hat in his hands. "Thomas owed me 2 weeks' wages, but I do not expect you to pay them. I know things must be difficult. I only wanted to tell you that I inventoried the stock last night and everything is secure. The building is locked up tight. When you are ready to decide what to do with it, I will help however I can." The mercantile. Helena had not even thought about it. Thomas had purchased it with his savings before they married, hoping to establish a stable income. It had done moderately well, but his illness had prevented him from giving it proper attention. Now it was hers, she supposed, along with whatever debts and complications came with it. "That is very kind of you, Mr. Pierce," she said, and found that she meant it. "I confess I have not had time to think about such practical matters." "Of course not. There is no rush." He hesitated, as though weighing his next words carefully. "I also wanted to say that if you need anything, anything at all, you need only ask. I know you are alone here, and this town can be hard on those without family or connections." Helena felt an unexpected tightness in her chest at his kindness. She had grown so accustomed to isolation during Thomas's illness that genuine human concern felt foreign. "Thank you," she managed. "That is generous." Adam nodded, placed his hat back on his head and tipped it to her before walking away. Helena watched him go, noting the easy confidence in his stride, the way he moved like someone comfortable in his own skin. She realized she was still twisting the ring on her finger and forced herself to stop. The boarding house where she had been living with Thomas was quiet when she returned. Mrs. Fletcher had left a covered plate of food on the small table in her room, along with a note expressing condolences. Helena sat on the edge of the narrow bed and stared at the food without appetite. The room was cramped and dark, with a single window that looked out onto an alley. Thomas's few possessions were still scattered about: his books, his pipe, his spectacles folded neatly on the bedside table. She would need to pack them away, she thought distantly. She would need to do many things. Instead, she pulled off the wedding ring and held it up to the fading light. It was plain, unadorned, sized for a woman with slender fingers. Thomas's mother must have been small like Helena. She tried to feel something as she looked at it: grief, loss, nostalgia, but found only numbness. The marriage had been a transaction more than a love story. Thomas had needed a nurse and companion. She had needed security and a place in the world. They had been kind to each other, nothing more. Keeping the ring felt dishonest somehow, like claiming an emotional connection that had never existed. It belonged to Thomas's family, not to her. She should return it, she decided. But to whom? Thomas had mentioned a brother once, someone who lived in Denver and worked on the railroad. She tried to remember a name but could not. The next morning, Helena forced herself to eat breakfast and then made her way down Bennett Avenue, the main street that ran through the heart of Victor. The town was bustling despite the early hour, full of miners heading to their shifts and shopkeepers opening their establishments. The sound of hammering echoed from the hills above, where new claims were being staked almost daily. Gold had been discovered in Cripple Creek just a few years earlier, and the entire region had exploded with fortune seekers. The mercantile was located in a decent position, halfway down the street with a clear view in both directions. Helena had only been inside a handful of times, usually when bringing Thomas lunch during his better days. She used the key he had kept on a leather cord around his neck and stepped inside. Sunlight filtered through dusty windows, illuminating shelves stocked with dry goods, canned provisions, tools, fabric, and dozens of other necessities. Everything was neatly organized, and Helena realized that Adam must have been maintaining the place even after Thomas became too ill to leave his bed. The realization made her throat tight. She spent the morning taking inventory, writing down what she found in a small notebook. Flour, sugar, coffee, beans, rice, cornmeal, lard, molasses, dried fruit, salt pork, tobacco, ammunition, nails, rope, lanterns, matches, soap, and countless other items filled the shelves. There was a surprising amount of stock, which meant Thomas had invested nearly everything he had into this place. It was worth something, she realized. Perhaps enough to allow her to return to Denver and start over somewhere. She was not known as the widow of a man she had barely loved. The bell above the door chimed, and Helena looked up to find Adam Pierce entering. He looked surprised to see her there. "Mrs. Morgan, I did not expect you so soon." "I needed to see what I am dealing with," she said, gesturing at the shelves around them. "You have been maintaining this place." Thomas's records show you working far more hours than he mentioned. Adam shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. He was a good man who was dealt a poor hand. It seemed right to help where I could. You said he owed you 2 weeks' wages. How much? Please, it does not matter. It matters to me, Mr. Pierce. I do not want to be in debt, especially not to someone who showed kindness to my husband. She kept her voice firm, businesslike. He quoted a sum that seemed far too modest for the work he had clearly been doing. Helena went to the cash box behind the counter, counted out the money, and handed it to him. He looked at the bills in his hand as though unsure what to do with them. "There is more here than I quoted," he said. "Consider it compensation for the extra work you clearly did that went unrecorded." She met his eyes steadily. "I also have a proposition. I do not know how to run a mercantile, and I do not know this town. I intend to sell this place and return to Denver, but that will take time. In the meanwhile, would you be willing to continue working here? I can pay you a fair wage from the profits, and you seem to already know the customers and the inventory." Adam studied her for a long moment, those storm cloud eyes seeming to see right through her composed exterior. "You are making plans already, so soon after losing your husband." The implied criticism stung, though his tone was not harsh. Helena lifted her chin. "I am being practical, Mr. Pierce. It is what the situation requires. Were you happy with him?" The question was blunt, inappropriate, and completely unexpected. Helena felt color rising in her cheeks. "That is an extremely personal question. I know. I am sorry." But he did not look particularly sorry. He looked curious and tense, as though her answer mattered to him in some way she could not understand. "I only ask because I saw you both together a few times when I delivered supplies to the boarding house. You were kind to him, gentle, patient, but I never saw love in your eyes, and I have been wondering if perhaps this is not the tragedy everyone assumes it to be." Helena should have ordered him out, should have been offended, angry, scandalized. Instead, she found herself answering honestly. "Thomas was a good man. I cared for him. But no, I did not love him, not in the way wives are supposed to love husbands. I do not think he loved me either, not truly. We were convenient for each other, and that seemed sufficient at the time. And now—" Adam took a step closer, his presence seeming to fill the small shop. "Now I am free, and that makes me feel terribly guilty because a good woman would be devastated, not relieved." The confession tumbled out before she could stop it. She pressed her hands against the counter, needing something solid to ground her. "I should not be telling you any of this. You are a stranger." "Sometimes strangers are the only ones we can tell the truth to," Adam said quietly. "They have no expectations of who we should be." Helena looked up at him, really looked at him for the first time. His face was weathered but handsome in a rugged way, with strong features and a mouth that looked like it smiled easily, though it was serious now. There was intelligence in his eyes and something else, a kind of loneliness that mirrored her own. "Will you work here?" she asked again, needing to return to practical matters before she said something else she would regret. "Yes," he said. "I will work here for as long as you need me." Over the following weeks, a routine established itself. Adam opened the mercantile each morning and managed the customers while Helena worked in the back room, learning the books and attempting to understand the financial situation she had inherited. Thomas had not been a good businessman, she discovered. He had extended too much credit to customers who never paid, had ordered inventory that sat unsold, and had priced things inconsistently. It was a wonder the place was still solvent. Adam proved invaluable. He knew every customer by name, understood what items moved quickly and what gathered dust, and had a natural head for the calculations required to price things competitively while still turning a profit. Helena found herself watching him sometimes through the doorway that separated the back room from the front, observing how he interacted with people. He was friendly without being familiar, firm with those who tried to negotiate unfair deals, and patient with those who struggled to count out coins. The miners respected him, the women trusted him, and even the children who came in to buy penny candy seemed to light up around him. "You should be running your own establishment," she told him one afternoon when business had slowed. "Why are you working here for wages when you clearly have the skills to succeed on your own?" Adam was restocking shelves, his back to her. His shoulders tensed slightly at the question. "I had my own place once, a ranch in Wyoming with cattle and horses, built it up from nothing over 6 years. What happened? A harsh winter 5 years ago, lost most of the herd. Then the bank called in my loans and I lost everything else." His voice was matter-of-fact, but Helena heard the old pain beneath it. "I've been working for other people ever since, saving what I can, hoping to start over someday. But it takes a lot of capital to begin again, and I am not as young as I once was." "How old are you?" Helena asked. 29. Old enough to know better than to dream too big. He turned to face her, leaning against the shelf with his arms crossed. "And you? How old is the widow who does not mourn?" 24. Old enough to know that marrying for security instead of love was a mistake, but not yet wise enough to know what to do instead. "You could stay here," Adam said. "Build something with this place, it has potential." "In Victor," Helena shook her head. "This is a mining town. When the gold runs out, it will become a ghost town. I would be foolish to invest my future here. The gold will not run out for years, maybe decades. Cripple Creek is one of the richest strikes in history." Adam gestured toward the window, where the constant activity of the street was visible. "This town is growing every day. There is opportunity here for those willing to take it." "I do not want opportunity. I want stability, predictability. A quiet life somewhere civilized." Even as she said it, Helena wondered if it was true. The truth was, she did not know what she wanted. She only knew that staying here in the place where she had watched Thomas die felt impossible. Adam studied her with that intense gaze that made her feel exposed. "You are lying to yourself. I have watched you over these past weeks. You come alive when you are working on the books, figuring out how to make this place more profitable. You have started rearranging inventory and suggesting new products. You are good at this, whether you want to admit it or not. Being capable of something does not mean I want to build my life around it. Then, what do you want to build your life around?" The question hung in the air between them. Helena did not have an answer. She turned away, busying herself with papers that did not need her attention. That evening, she sat in her boarding house room and pulled out Thomas's wedding ring again. She had been carrying it in her pocket, unable to decide what to do with it. The longer she kept it, the more it felt like a weight dragging her backward. She needed to let it go, to sever this last connection to a marriage that had never been real. She decided to visit the church the next morning and ask Reverend Mitchell if he knew how to contact Thomas's brother in Denver. Perhaps the family would want the ring back. It felt like the right thing to do, the respectable thing. But when she arrived at the small wooden church on the edge of town, she found it empty except for a woman scrubbing the floors. The woman informed her that the Reverend had gone to Cripple Creek for a week to minister to a community there. Helena thanked her and left, the ring still in her pocket. She walked without direction, finding herself climbing one of the paths that led up the mountainside above Victor. The October air was crisp and thin, making her slightly breathless, but the physical exertion felt good after weeks of sitting in dusty rooms. The aspens had turned gold, blazing against the dark green of the pines, and the view across the valley was spectacular. She found a flat rock and sat, pulling out the ring and holding it up to catch the sunlight. Such a simple thing, this band of gold. It represented promises that had been half-heartedly kept, a union that had satisfied social expectations but left both parties essentially alone. Was it wrong that she felt more alive now, as a widow, than she had as a wife? "That is a dangerous place to sit," a voice said behind her. Helena turned quickly to find Adam approaching on the trail. He must have seen her leave town and followed her, though she could not imagine why. "I am perfectly safe," she said, though she moved slightly away from the edge of the rock. "I did not mean physically dangerous. I meant dangerous for thinking." He sat down nearby, not close enough to crowd her but near enough that she could see the details of his face. Beautiful views tend to make people philosophical, and philosophy can lead to all kinds of uncomfortable realizations. "Is that why you are here?" "Following me to prevent uncomfortable realizations. I am here because I saw you leave town looking like you were carrying the weight of the world, and I wanted to make sure you were all right." He nodded toward the ring in her hand. "You have been carrying that around for weeks. I see you take it out sometimes when you think no one is watching." Helena closed her fingers around the ring. "I want to return it to Thomas's family. It does not feel right to keep it." "Why not? You were his wife. It is yours by right." "But I did not earn it, not really." She opened her hand again, staring at the gold band. "A wedding ring is supposed to symbolize love, commitment, a life built together. This ring symbolizes an arrangement, a practical solution to practical problems. Keeping it feels like lying about what we had." Adam was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the mountains in the distance. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "My parents had a marriage like that. My father needed someone to help run the ranch, and my mother needed a home after her own parents died. They married out of necessity, not love. But over the years, they built something real. They grew to care for each other deeply, to depend on each other, to choose each other every day even when they did not have to. By the time my father died, my mother was truly devastated. The marriage might have started as an arrangement, but it became love. But it did not happen that way for Thomas and me. There was not enough time." "No," Adam agreed. "There was not. But that does not diminish what you did give him. You gave him comfort in his final months, dignity, care. You were there when he died, holding his hand. That matters, even if it was not passionate love." Helena felt tears stinging her eyes. "Then why do I feel so guilty for being relieved that it is over?" "Because you are human. Because complicated feelings are part of being alive." Adam turned to look at her directly. "You are allowed to mourn what you lost without pretending you lost more than you did. You can honor what was real about your marriage without romanticizing what was not." "How did you become so wise?" Helena asked, wiping at her eyes. "Losing everything has a way of teaching you what actually matters." He smiled slightly, but there was sadness in it. "When I lost my ranch, I thought my life was over. I had tied all my identity, all my worth to that place. Without it, I did not know who I was. It took me a long time to realize that I was still myself, that the land did not define me. What I built mattered, but what I could still build mattered more." Helena looked at the ring again, then at Adam. An impulse seized her, born from weeks of confusion and grief and the strange comfort this near stranger had become. "Come with me," she said abruptly, standing. "Where?" But he rose to follow her. She led him back down the trail toward town, walking quickly. She went straight to the mercantile, which was closed for the afternoon, and let herself in with the key. Adam followed, looking puzzled. Helena went behind the counter and pulled out the ledger where she had been recording the store's business. She found the entry she wanted and pointed to it. "You asked what I want to build my life around. I think I want to build something like this. Something that is mine, that I created, that matters to people. I think I want to make this mercantile into something truly successful." Adam leaned over the ledger, reading what she was showing him. It was a plan she had been sketching out: ideas for expansion, new product lines, a system for managing credit more effectively. "This is good," he said quietly. "Really good. You have a mind for business." "I think I do," Helena admitted. "I never had the chance to find out before. I was always supposed to be someone's daughter, then someone's wife. I was not supposed to have ambitions of my own. But Thomas is gone, and I have no one to answer to anymore. I could do this. I could make something of this place." Adam looked up from the ledger, his eyes meeting hers. "Then do it." "I would need help. I do not know enough about running a store yet." "I will help you," he said immediately. "I will teach you everything I know." Helena felt something shift in her chest, some locked door beginning to open. "Why? Why would you invest your time in helping me build something when you could be saving to build your own future?" Adam was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was low and honest in a way that made Helena's breath catch. "Because when I look at you, I see someone like me. Someone who had life take away their choices and is trying to figure out how to claim them back. Because watching you come alive over these past weeks, seeing you discover what you are capable of, has reminded me what it feels like to hope. And because I believe that sometimes the best things we build are the things we build together." The words hung in the air between them, laden with meaning that went beyond business partnerships. Helena felt her heart beating faster, felt the warmth rising in her cheeks. She should step back, maintain proper distance. She was a widow of barely 2 months. This was too soon, too fast, too inappropriate. But when she looked at Adam, she did not see judgment or expectation. She saw understanding, possibility, and something that might be the beginning of love. "I need to do something first," she said, pulling the wedding ring from her pocket. "I need to let go of the past before I can move forward into whatever future I am building." "How will you do that?" Helena turned the ring over in her fingers one last time, then walked to the back door of the mercantile. She opened it and stepped into the alley, Adam following. Behind the building was a small patch of earth where nothing grew, just dirt and rock and the occasional weed. She knelt down, used a piece of scrap wood to dig a small hole and placed the ring inside. Then she covered it over and patted the earth flat. "You are burying it?" Adam asked. "I am letting it rest," Helena said, standing and brushing dirt from her hands. "Thomas is buried in the cemetery with proper respects. This is how I let go of the marriage itself, not by returning it to his family who did not care enough to attend his funeral, not by selling it for money, but by letting it return to the earth. It can be a memory now instead of a weight." She expected to feel sadness or regret, but instead she felt light, unburdened. The ring was gone. That part of her life was finished. She was free to become whoever she chose to be next. She turned to find Adam watching her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. There was admiration in his eyes and affection, and something warmer that she was not quite ready to name. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we make this mercantile into the most successful business in Victor," Helena said, and found herself smiling genuinely for the first time in months. "Now we build something worth building." They shook hands on it there in the alley, a formal agreement between business partners. But Helena noticed how Adam's hand lingered in hers, warm and calloused and solid. She noticed how he looked at her like she was something precious. And she noticed how her own heart responded, quickening in a way it never had with Thomas. It was too soon for this, she told herself. Far too soon to be feeling anything for any man. But the heart, it seemed, followed its own schedule, indifferent to social proprieties and proper mourning periods. Over the following months, Helena and Adam transformed the mercantile. They renegotiated with suppliers, brought in new products that the mining community needed, established a fair but firm credit policy, and extended their hours to accommodate the miners' schedules. Helena proved to have a gift for understanding what customers wanted before they knew they wanted it. She added a section of books and newspapers, brought in better quality fabric, and even convinced a widow from Denver to supply baked goods twice a week that sold out within hours. Adam handled the physical labor and the more difficult customers, but he also proved to be an excellent teacher. He showed Helena how to detect when someone was trying to cheat her, how to negotiate with suppliers, how to read the subtle signs that indicated which products would trend in coming months. They worked side by side 12 hours a day, and Helena discovered that partnership could be its own kind of intimacy. She also discovered that Adam Pierce was a far more interesting man than she had initially realized. He was well-read despite his limited formal education, with a particular love of history and poetry. He played the harmonica beautifully, sometimes entertaining her with songs during slow afternoons. He had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh in ways she had forgotten she could. And he was unfailingly kind to her, to customers, to the stray dogs that wandered Bennett Avenue looking for scraps. The attraction between them grew slowly, carefully, like something being built stone by stone. It started with long conversations after closing, sitting on the front porch of the Mercantile and watching the sun set behind the mountains. It progressed to accidental touches, hands brushing as they reached for the same ledger, shoulders bumping as they worked in the cramped back room. It deepened through shared confidences, with Adam telling her about his failed ranch and his dreams of trying again, and Helena revealing her fears about being alone, about never mattering to anyone, about wasting her life on safety instead of passion. "You matter," Adam told her one evening in early December as snow began to fall outside. They were taking inventory and the store was warm from the pot-bellied stove. "You matter to the people who depend on this store. You matter to me." Helena looked up from her clipboard, heart hammering. "Adam, I know it is too soon," he said quickly. "I know you are still in mourning and I would never presume to rush you, but I need you to know that I see you, Helena. Not as Thomas's widow, not as the woman who runs this store, but as you, and what I see is extraordinary." She should have told him to stop, should have maintained propriety, kept the boundaries clear. Instead, she crossed the small space between them and took his hand in hers. "You see me better than anyone ever has," she said quietly. "Thomas looked at me and saw a solution to his problems. My parents looked at me and saw a daughter to marry off respectably. But you look at me and see a person with dreams and potential and worth. Do you know how rare that is?" Adam's fingers tightened around hers. "I see it because it is there. You were always this person, Helena. You just needed the chance to show it." "I am frightened," she admitted. "What if I care for you and lose you too? What if I am not good at this, at feeling things? I was not good at it with Thomas. Thomas was dying when you married him. You were trying to save someone who could not be saved. That is not the same as building something with someone who is whole and present and choosing you freely." Adam raised his free hand and gently touched her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she had not realized was falling. "I am not asking for anything you are not ready to give. I just need you to know that when you are ready, I am here. I am not going anywhere." Helena leaned into his touch, allowing herself for the first time to feel the full weight of what was growing between them. It was not the same as what she had felt or not felt with Thomas. This was warmer, deeper, more terrifying because it was real. This was the kind of feeling that could break her heart if it went wrong, but it was also the kind of feeling that could make her whole if she was brave enough to try. "I need time," she said. but not as much as I thought I would." "Is that wrong?" "There is no wrong when it comes to what the heart wants," Adam said. "There is only honest or dishonest. You have been honest about what you felt for Thomas, about what you feel now. That is all anyone can ask." They stood there in the quiet mercantile, hands joined, something unspoken but understood passing between them. Outside, the snow fell heavier, beginning to accumulate on Bennett Avenue. The mining town of Victor was settling in for winter, and Helena felt herself settling too, not into grief or resignation, but into the possibility of something new. Christmas came, and with it, a strange kind of joy. Helena and Adam decorated the mercantile with pine boughs and ribbons, and she felt more festive than she had in years. Mrs. Fletcher invited her to Christmas dinner at the boarding house, and Helena was surprised to find Adam there as well, having been invited as one of the establishment's long-term residents. They ate roasted chicken and potatoes, shared stories with the other boarders, and sang carols around Mrs. Fletcher's old piano. When Adam sang, his voice was a pleasant baritone that made something in Helena's chest ache with longing. She found herself imagining future Christmases, ones where they might celebrate together not as business partners, but as something more. After dinner, Adam walked her back to her room as the boarding house was gender segregated with men on one floor and women on another. They paused outside her door, the hallway empty and quiet. "I have something for you," Adam said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small wrapped package. "It is not much, but I wanted you to have it." Helena unwrapped it carefully to find a small leather-bound journal. The leather was soft and well-made, and her initials had been tooled into the cover. "Adam, this is beautiful. I noticed you were always writing notes on scraps of paper, ideas for the business, thoughts about inventory. I thought you might like something more permanent to record them in." He looked almost shy, something she had never seen from him before. "And maybe someday you could write about other things too. Dreams, plans, whatever you want to remember." Helena ran her fingers over the smooth leather, touched beyond words. It was a thoughtful gift, one that showed he had been paying attention to her habits and needs. "Thank you," she said, and impulsively stood on her toes to kiss his cheek. She felt him go still, then his hand came up to cup her face, gently turning her so their eyes met. "Helena," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I am trying very hard to be a gentleman and give you time, but you are making it extraordinarily difficult." "Maybe I do not want you to be quite so much of a gentleman," she whispered, surprising herself with her boldness. For a long moment they simply looked at each other, the air between them charged with possibility. Then Adam stepped back, though she could see the effort it cost him. "Not like this," he said. "Not in a hallway, rushed and hidden. When I kiss you, and I will kiss you. If you will let me, it will be somewhere we can take our time, where I can do it properly." The promise in his words made Helena's knees weak. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and slipped into her room. Only when the door was closed did she allow herself to smile, pressing the journal to her chest and feeling giddy in a way she had not felt since she was a girl. The new year of 1893 arrived with bitter cold and heavy snow. Business at the mercantile slowed as people hunkered down to wait out the worst of the winter weather. Helena and Adam used the quieter days to plan expansions for spring. She had realized that the building next door, an abandoned assay office, was available for rent. If they could take it over, they could expand the mercantile significantly, perhaps even add a section for mining equipment and a small restaurant area where miners could get hot meals. "It is ambitious," Adam said when she presented the idea, but his eyes were bright with interest. "We would need capital for renovations, additional inventory, staff to run the restaurant." We have been turning a profit for 3 months now, Helena pointed out, showing him the numbers in the ledger. If we saved for another 3 months and took a small loan from the bank, we could make it work. Victor is growing every day. The mines are producing more gold than anyone expected. The town will need more services, more businesses. We could position ourselves to be essential. Adam studied the figures, then looked at her with something like awe. You really do have a gift for this. 6 months ago, you knew nothing about running a business, and now you are planning an expansion that could make us one of the largest mercantile operations in the region. Us, Helena repeated, latching onto the word. So you think we should do it? I think if you believe it is possible, then it is possible. He leaned back in his chair, regarding her seriously. But I also think we need to discuss what us means. We have been dancing around it for months now, Helena. We are business partners, yes, but we are also more than that, or we want to be. If we are going to expand this business, we need to be clear about what we are building and who we are building it for. Helena's pulse quickened. What are you asking? Adam stood and came around the desk, taking her hands and drawing her to her feet. I am asking what your intentions are toward me, Mrs. Morgan, because my intentions toward you are quite serious, and I need to know if I am alone in this feeling. You are not alone, Helena said, her voice barely above a whisper. I think about you constantly. I look forward to seeing you every morning. I find excuses to work late so we can have more time together. You have become essential to me, Adam, and it terrifies me. Why does it terrify you? Because losing you would break me in a way that losing Thomas never could. Because what I feel for you is real and deep, and so much more than I ever expected to feel for anyone. The confession tumbled out, raw and honest. I did not know I could feel this way. I thought maybe I was not capable of it. But then you walked into my life and showed me what it means to be truly seen, truly valued. You make me want to be brave. Adam's hands tightened on hers. Then be brave with me. We will build this business together, and we will build a life together if you will have me. I know it is soon, I know people will talk, but I do not care about any of that. I care about you, Helena. I love you. The words hung in the air between them, enormous and transformative. Helena felt tears streaming down her face, but they were not sad tears. They were tears of relief, of joy, of finally feeling something true and good after so much emptiness. I love you too, she said, and realized as she said it that it was absolutely true. This was what love felt like, this warmth, this certainty, this sense that she had found the other half of herself. I love you, Adam Pierce, and yes, I want to build a life with you. Yes to all of it. He pulled her into his arms then, holding her tightly, and she felt safe in a way she had never felt before. Not safe from harm or difficulty. Life would always bring those, but safe to be herself, to want things, to dream. Safe to love and be loved in return. When he finally kissed her, it was everything she had imagined and more. It was gentle and passionate, reverent and eager, a promise and a beginning. She kissed him back with all the feeling she had been holding inside, all the loneliness and longing and hope that had built up over months of working beside him and falling for him piece by piece. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Adam rested his forehead against hers. There is something I need to tell you, he said. Something I should have told you earlier, but I was afraid. Helena tensed slightly. What is it? When Thomas hired me, it was not by accident. I was coming out of the doctor's office. I had cut my hand badly on a piece of equipment and needed stitches. You were there with Thomas for one of his appointments. I saw you in the waiting room, saw how gently you spoke to him even though it was clear he was difficult and demanding in his illness. I saw the patience in your eyes, the kindness, and I thought you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. Helena pulled back to look at him. Adam, I started working for Thomas because I wanted a reason to be near you, he continued. I told myself I was just being helpful, just being kind to a dying man. But the truth is, I was already half in love with you before Thomas even passed. I never acted on it, never would have while you were married. But my motives were not entirely pure, and you deserve to know that. Helena thought about this revelation, turning it over in her mind. She should perhaps be scandalized, but instead she felt oddly comforted. So you saw me and decided I was worth knowing, worth working hard for, worth waiting for. How is that wrong? Because I was coveting another man's wife. You were seeing a woman who was trapped and lonely and making the best of a difficult situation. You saw me, Adam, really saw me when no one else did. I cannot be angry about that. She cupped his face in her hands. And for what it is worth, I noticed you too. Even when I was trying not to, even when I felt guilty for it, I noticed you. You made me feel alive when I had forgotten what that felt like. Relief flooded his features. I needed you to know, no secrets between us, not if we are building a life together. No secrets, Helena agreed. We will be honest with each other always, even when it is hard. They sealed the promise with another kiss, and Helena felt the last of her guilt and confusion melting away. Thomas had been a chapter in her life, one that had taught her what she did not want. Adam was a new chapter entirely, one that promised partnership and passion, and the kind of love that poets wrote about. They told Mrs. Fletcher first, who cried with happiness, and immediately began planning their wedding. Then they told the regulars at the Mercantile, who reacted with surprise but general approval. Some of the older women in town clucked their tongues about the unseemly haste. Helena had been widowed less than 6 months, but most people seemed to understand that life was short and happiness should be grasped when it appeared. They married in April of 1893 in the same small church where Thomas's funeral had been held. Reverend Mitchell performed the ceremony, and Helena wore a new dress of deep blue that she had sewn herself from fabric in their store. Adam wore his best suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his eyes never leaving her face throughout the ceremony. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Adam kissed her with such tender joy that several women in the congregation sighed audibly. Helena kissed him back, feeling no guilt, no hesitation, only pure happiness. This was what marriage should feel like, she thought, this certainty, this rightness. The reception was held in the Mercantile, which they had closed for the day. Mrs. Fletcher provided the food, friends donated music, and the whole town seemed to turn out to celebrate. Helena danced with Adam as his friends played fiddles and harmonicas, and she laughed more in those few hours than she had in the entire previous year. That night, in the small house they had rented on the edge of town, Adam carried her over the threshold and set her down gently in the bedroom. The intimacy that followed was everything Helena had hoped for, and nothing like her experiences with Thomas. Adam was patient and passionate, attentive to her needs, making her feel cherished and desired. For the first time in her life, she understood what the poets meant when they wrote about two souls becoming one. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, Helena felt complete. "I did not know it could be like this," she whispered. "Neither did I," Adam said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "I have been with women before, but I have never made love to someone I truly loved. It changes everything." "Yes," Helena agreed, running her fingers over his chest. "It does." They lay in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds outside. Then Adam spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "I was thinking about what you said about the ring, about burying it behind the Mercantile. I wonder if we should put something there in that spot. Plant something growing to replace what was buried." Helena lifted her head to look at him. "What would we plant? Roses, maybe. Something beautiful and living. something that will grow and thrive as we grow and thrive. We can tend it together, watch it bloom every year. It would be a reminder that endings can become beginnings. Tears pricked Helena's eyes at the poetry of the idea. That is perfect. We will plant roses there and they will be ours. A symbol of what we are building. A symbol of love that was worth waiting for, Adam said, pulling her close again. The expansion of the mercantile proceeded smoothly over the following months. They secured the loan, rented the adjacent building, and hired a contractor to knock through the connecting wall. Helena threw herself into designing the new space, creating separate sections for different types of goods and a cozy area in the back for the restaurant. They hired 2 women from town to run the restaurant, a mother and daughter team who had a reputation for excellent cooking. Adam focused on the physical labor, working alongside the contractors to ensure everything was built to their specifications. Helena often watched him working, marveling at his strength and skill. He was in his element when building. His face lit up with satisfaction as walls went up and shelves took shape. By August, the expansion was complete, and Morgan Pierce Mercantile and Restaurant opened to great fanfare. The name had been Helena's idea, a blending of their identities that symbolized their equal partnership. Adam had protested that her name should come first since the original business had been hers, but Helena had insisted on alphabetical order. Besides, she had said, Morgan Pierce sounds better than Pierce Morgan. It has a rhythm to it. The business thrived beyond their expectations. The restaurant became a popular gathering spot for miners who were tired of their own cooking, and the expanded mercantile carried everything from basic supplies to luxury goods shipped in from Denver and beyond. Helena proved to be a shrewd buyer with an instinct for what would sell, and Adam's friendly manner kept customers loyal. They worked hard, often 14 hours a day, but it never felt like drudgery because they were working together towards something they both believed in. Their evenings were spent in their small house, cooking dinner together, raiding, talking about plans and dreams. Their nights were spent discovering each other, learning what gave pleasure, building an intimacy that went beyond the physical. In November, Helena realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with a complicated mix of emotions. She was happy, excited about starting a family with Adam, but also nervous about how a child would change their carefully balanced life. She told Adam over dinner one evening, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He went still for a moment, fork halfway to his mouth, then slowly set it down. "A baby," he said, his voice strange. "Yes, I am about 3 months along, I think. Are you?" She hesitated. "Are you happy about it?" Adam stood abruptly, came around the table, and pulled her into his arms. "Happy?" "Helena, I am overwhelmed. I am terrified. I am more grateful than I can express." His voice was thick with emotion. "A child, our child, a family." Helena felt her own eyes filling with tears. "I was worried you might not be ready. We have been married less than a year and the business is still growing." "We will figure it out," Adam said firmly. "We always do. We are a good team, you and I. We will be good parents too." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Helena had to gradually reduce her hours at the mercantile as she grew larger. Adam hired additional help, including a young man named Daniel who showed promise as a bookkeeper, allowing Helena to focus on training him while she prepared for the baby. In May of 1894, Helena gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Andrew Thomas Pierce, honoring Adam with the first name and acknowledging Helena's first husband with the middle name. It seemed right to Helena to include Thomas in this way, to remember the man who had inadvertently brought her to Victor and set her on the path to finding Adam. Motherhood was harder than Helena had anticipated. Andrew was a colicky baby who cried often and slept little. She was exhausted, overwhelmed, and sometimes resentful of the time the baby required when she wanted to be at the mercantile. But Adam was endlessly patient, taking night shifts with the baby when he could, changing diapers without complaint, and constantly reassuring Helena that she was doing well. "You are a wonderful mother," he told her one particularly difficult night when she was in tears of frustration. "Andrew is healthy and loved, nothing else matters. But I miss the mercantile, I miss working with you, I miss feeling competent at something." The confession felt shameful, but she needed to say it. "Then bring him to the mercantile," Adam said simply. "We will set up a cradle in the back room. You can work while he naps, and when he needs you, you will be right there. Many women in this town do the same." It seemed so obvious once he said it, but Helena had been so caught up in ideas of what a proper mother should do that she had not considered it. They brought Andrew to work with them starting the next week, and Helena found her equilibrium again. She could rock the cradle with her foot while reviewing ledgers, could nurse the baby while discussing inventory with suppliers. It was chaotic and far from the genteel motherhood she had imagined, but it worked. As Andrew grew, he became easier. His colic faded, and his personality emerged curious, determined, already showing signs of his father's easygoing nature. Helena found motherhood more rewarding once she could interact with him more, once she could see him responding to the world around him. The mercantile continued to expand. By 1896, they had opened a second location in Cripple Creek, the larger mining town a few miles from Victor. Adam split his time between the two locations while Helena primarily managed the Victor store, though they both did constant traveling back and forth. They hired more staff, eventually employing almost 20 people across both locations. Money was no longer a concern. They had gone from struggling to comfortable to genuinely prosperous. They bought a proper house in Victor, a beautiful Victorian with gingerbread trim and a wide front porch. Helena had a garden planted, including the rose bushes they had promised each other, which bloomed magnificently every June. Andrew grew into a bright, energetic toddler, then a curious child. In 1898, Helena gave birth to twin girls, Hannah and Iris, who brought chaos and joy in equal measure. The house was constantly noisy, full of children's laughter and occasional tears, scattered toys and sticky handprints. Helena, who had once lived in careful quiet, found that she loved the mess of it all. Adam was a devoted father, patient with the children's endless questions, willing to get down on the floor and play, never too tired to read bedtime stories. Watching him with their children, Helena often felt her heart might burst with love for him. He had given her so much: a partnership, a purpose, a family, a love that grew deeper every year. In 1900, they finally paid off all their business loans and owned their properties outright. To celebrate, they took a family trip to Denver, staying in a fancy hotel and taking the children to see the sights. It was Andrew's first time on a train, and his excitement was contagious. The twins were 3 and into everything, requiring constant vigilance, but even their mischief felt like an adventure. One evening, after putting the exhausted children to bed in their hotel suite, Helena and Adam sat on their room's small balcony, watching the city lights and enjoying a rare moment of quiet. You ever think about what your life might have been like if Thomas had not died? Adam asked, his arm around her shoulders. Helena considered the question seriously. Sometimes. I think I would have cared for him until the end, mourned him appropriately, and then probably returned to Denver to live as a respectable widow. I might have remarried eventually, someone suitable and safe. I would never have discovered that I had a talent for business. I would never have known what it felt like to build something meaningful. I would never have known what real love felt like. Do you think you could have fallen in love with Thomas given time? No, Helena said honestly. We were too different, wanted two different things, and I think he knew that. Near the end, when he was very ill, he told me that he was sorry he could not give me a real marriage, could not be the husband I deserved. I think he knew I was just playing a role, being who I was supposed to be. He deserved better to someone who could have loved him wholeheartedly. Adam was quiet for a moment. I am grateful to him in a strange way. He brought you to Victor. He gave you the mercantile. Without him, we might never have met. I like to think we would have found each other somehow, Helena said, leaning her head on his shoulder. I do not believe in fate exactly, but I believe some people are meant to be together. We fit, you and I. We make each other better. You make me better, Adam agreed. You gave me a reason to hope again after I thought I had lost everything. You showed me that failure is not permanent, that there is always another chance to build something worthwhile. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city and thinking about the unlikely path that had brought them to this moment. Two people who had lost so much, who had started with so little, who had found each other against all odds and built an empire of sorts, not just a business empire, but an empire of love and family and partnership. I want to tell you something, Helena said after a while. Something I have never told anyone. What is it? When I buried that wedding ring behind the mercantile, I made a promise to myself. I promised that I would never again settle for less than real love, real partnership, real purpose. I promised that whatever I built next would be authentic, would be mine, would matter. And then you walked into my life and you became all of those things. She turned to look at him, her eyes shining with tears in the city lights. You are my real love, Adam. You are my purpose. You are the best thing I ever built. Adam pulled her close, kissing her with the same passion and tenderness he had shown on their wedding night. And you are mine, he said against her lips. My love, my partner, my home. Everything good in my life comes from you. They returned to Victor the next week, back to their busy life of running businesses and raising children. Andrew started school that fall, and the twins began taking their first real sentences. Helena found herself pregnant again, a surprise but a welcome one. Their fourth child, a daughter they named Grace, was born in the spring of 1901. The years passed in a blur of work and family, of challenges met and overcome, of small joys and occasional sorrows. The mines around Victor continued to produce gold, and the town continued to grow. The mercantile thrived, becoming an institution that everyone in the region depended on. Helena and Adam grew older together, their love deepening into something comfortable and enduring. They knew each other's thoughts without speaking, could communicate with a glance across a crowded room, still found reasons to laugh together every day. Their children grew up watching parents who genuinely liked each other, who treated each other with respect and affection, who showed them what a healthy marriage looked like. Andrew eventually took over the management of the Cripple Creek location, showing the same business instincts his mother had. The twins went to college in Denver, rare for women at the time, but Helena and Adam had always believed in education for all their children regardless of gender. Grace became a teacher, staying in Victor and eventually marrying the son of the doctor who had attended Thomas all those years ago. In 1915, Adam and Helena celebrated their 22nd wedding anniversary. They were in their 40s now, their hair showing streaks of gray, their faces lined with years of laughter and hard work. They had survived economic downturns, harsh winters, children's illnesses, the thousand small crises that made up a life. Through it all, they had held onto each other. For their anniversary, They took a rare day off and hiked up the same trail where they had talked about the wedding ring all those years ago. It was harder now, their bodies not as young and resilient, but they made it to the same flat rock where Helena had once sat contemplating her uncertain future. They sat together, looking out over the valley. Victor had grown substantially, though it was past its absolute peak now. Some people were leaving as the easily accessible gold became scarcer, but the town was still vibrant, still home. "You remember what I said here?" Adam asked, taking her hand. "About my parents' marriage, how it started as an arrangement but became love. I remember. I was wrong about one thing. I said there was not enough time for it to happen between you and Thomas. But the truth is, it was not about time. It was about finding the right person. You could have spent 50 years with Thomas and never felt what you and I found in a few months. It is not about how long you are together. It is about whether you are together with someone who sees you, who chooses you, who makes you want to be your best self." Helena squeezed his hand. "You have always been a romantic, Adam Pierce." "Only with you," he said, and kissed her tenderly. They sat there until the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and pink. Then they walked back down to Victor hand in hand, to their home, to their family, to the life they had built together from ashes and hope, and a love that had surprised them both with its depth and durability. The rose bushes they had planted behind the mercantile, in the spot where the old wedding ring lay buried, had grown into a magnificent tangle that bloomed every summer. They were wild and beautiful, fed by the ring, and all it represented endings that became beginnings, sorrow that transformed into joy, practical arrangements that could not compare to genuine love. Helena sometimes stood by those roses and thought about the woman she had been, the frightened widow who had not known her own strength or worth. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone from a distant past. She had become someone entirely different, a successful businesswoman, a beloved wife, a devoted mother, a pillar of her community. Not because anyone had rescued her, but because she had found the courage to rescue herself and the wisdom to accept partnership with someone who saw her as an equal. Years continued to pass. The children married and had children of their own. The mercantile remained successful, though Adam and Helena eventually sold it to Andrew and his wife, ready to enjoy a quieter retirement. They traveled some, but mostly they stayed in Victor, in the town that had become truly home. They grew old together gracefully, their love never fading even as their bodies slowed and weakened. Adam's hair went completely white, and Helena developed arthritis in her hands, but they still walked together every evening when weather permitted, still sat on their porch and talked about everything and nothing, still reached for each other in the night. In the summer of 1928, on a warm June evening when the roses were in full bloom, they sat together on their porch swing, surrounded by grandchildren playing in the yard. They were in their 50s now, old by the standards of their time, but still healthy and active. "I have been thinking about legacy," Adam said, watching the children play. "About what we leave behind when we are gone." "What have you concluded?" Helena asked, her head on his shoulder. "That it is not about the money or the business or even the buildings we helped construct. It is about the love we gave and the love we received. It is about showing our children and grandchildren what it looks like to build a life with integrity and partnership. It is about all the small kindnesses, the moments of grace, the times we chose love over fear." Helena smiled, thinking about the terrified widow she had once been, trying to return a wedding ring to a family who had not cared enough to mourn their son. "I tried to give that ring back," she said. "Do you remember? I was going to return it to Thomas's family, but I could not figure out how. And then you followed me up the mountain and we talked, and everything changed." "I remember," Adam said. "I remember thinking that you were the bravest person I had ever met, facing your grief and confusion so honestly. I remember wanting to help you, to be there for you, even though I had no right to feel that way." "You had every right," Helena said firmly. "Love does not ask permission. It does not wait for the appropriate moment. It shows up when it shows up, and we either have the courage to embrace it or we spend our lives wondering what might have been." "I am grateful every day that we had the courage," Adam said, kissing her temple. "Building a life with you has been the greatest adventure of my existence." "And mine," Helena agreed. They rocked gently on the swing, watching the sun set behind the mountains, surrounded by the evidence of their love, the children and grandchildren, the house they had made a home, the town they had helped build, the decades of partnership and devotion that had transformed them both. That night, as they lay in bed, Helena reached for Adam's hand in the darkness. "When I was young, I thought love was something that happened to you, like weather or fate, something you had no control over. But I learned that real love is something you choose every day. You choose to see the best in someone, to forgive their flaws, to build something together even when it is hard. Every morning I wake up and choose you, Adam Pierce, and I will keep choosing you for as long as I live." Adam brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "And I choose you, Helena. Today, tomorrow, always. You are the best decision I ever made." They fell asleep like that, hands joined, hearts intertwined, two souls who had found each other against unlikely odds and built something extraordinary from the ashes of loss and loneliness. The years that followed brought the inevitable challenges of aging, but they faced everything together. When Adam's eyesight began to fail, Helena read to him every evening. When Helena's arthritis made it hard for her to garden, Adam took over tending the roses. They adapted, adjusted, supported each other through every difficulty. Their love story became legendary in Victor. People spoke of the widow and the cowboy who had built an empire from a struggling mercantile, who had loved each other with a devotion that was visible to everyone who saw them together. Young couples came to them for advice, and Helena always told them the same thing: find someone who sees you. Find someone who chooses you. Find someone who makes you brave enough to be yourself. In 1935, Adam fell ill with pneumonia. Despite the best efforts of doctors, his lungs could not recover. Helena sat by his bedside day and night, holding his hand, talking to him about their life together, reminding him of all the joy they had shared. "I would do it all again," Adam whispered on what would be his last day. "Every moment with you was a gift. You made me so happy, Helena. So incredibly happy. And you made me whole," Helena said through her tears. "You showed me what love could be. You gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams." "The ring," Adam said suddenly, his eyes focusing on her with unexpected clarity. "You buried Thomas's ring and planted roses. What will you plant for me?" Helena had not thought about it, but the answer came immediately. "Apple trees, strong and enduring, bearing fruit for generations. Trees that our great-grandchildren can sit under and remember us." "Perfect," Adam said, and smiled at her one last time before closing his eyes. He died peacefully that evening, surrounded by family, having lived a full and meaningful life. Helena mourned him deeply, but without the emptiness she had felt when Thomas died. This grief was clean and honest, the sorrow of losing someone truly loved, someone who had been genuinely chosen. She planted apple trees in the yard, just as she had promised, and tended them faithfully. She lived another 12 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren, still respected in the community, still carrying herself with the dignity and strength that had defined her life. On warm summer evenings, she sat on the porch, and thought about the two marriages she had known. One had been born of necessity, a practical arrangement that had given her safety but not joy. The other had been born of genuine connection, a partnership that had given her everything she never knew she needed. The difference, she often thought, was not just in the men themselves but in who she had been. With Thomas, she had been playing a role, being the wife she thought she should be. With Adam, she had been herself, ambitious, capable, passionate, flawed. He had loved her not despite those qualities, but because of them. When Helena Morgan Pierce died in 1947 at the age of 79, she was remembered as one of the founders of Victor's Prosperity, a businesswoman ahead of her time, a devoted wife and mother, and a woman who had lived life on her own terms. Her funeral was attended by hundreds, and she was buried next to Adam in the cemetery where this story began, where she had once stood as a frightened widow not knowing what her future held. The apple trees grew tall and strong, bearing fruit every year. The rose bushes behind what had once been their mercantile continued to bloom, wild and beautiful. And somewhere beneath those roses, a simple gold wedding ring lay in the earth, a reminder that sometimes the things we try to return, the chapters we try to close, are exactly what lead us to our true beginning. The story of Helena and Adam lived on in Victor for generations, told and retold until it took on the quality of legend. People spoke of the widow who had buried her past and planted a future, of the cowboy who had seen her worth when she could not see it herself, of the love that had transformed them both. It became the kind of story that gave people hope, that reminded them that endings could become beginnings, that real love was worth waiting for, and that the greatest adventures often started with the courage to let go of what was and embrace what could be. In the end, it was not the mercantile or the money or the business success that mattered. It was the love, the deep, abiding, transformative love that Helena and Adam had built together, brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. That was their true legacy, more enduring than any building, more valuable than any fortune. They had shown that love, real love, was not something that happened to you but something you created together through honesty, partnership, courage, and the daily decision to see and choose each other. And in a small mountain town in Colorado, where gold had once drawn thousands seeking fortune, the real treasure had always been the simple, profound connection between two souls who had found each other, chosen each other, and built a love that lasted beyond death itself into the stories told by those who came after, reminding each new generation that true love, when you are brave enough to grasp it, can transform everything.